Welcome, everybody, and thanks very much for coming out on this snowy day. I'd like to call the meeting to order. We respectfully acknowledge that the County of Haliburton is located on Treaty 20 Mississauga territory and in the traditional territory of the Mississauga and Chippewa Nations, collectively known as the Williams Treaties First Nations, which are Curve Lake, Rama, Hiawatha, Alderville, Scugog Island, Beausoleil, and Georgina Island First Nations. We acknowledge the shared presence of Indigenous nations throughout the area and recognize its original Indigenous inhabitants as the stewards of its lands and waters since time immemorial. May I please have a mover and a seconder to adopt the agenda? Lisa and Jackie, thank you. All in favor? That's carried. All right. So again, my very great thanks for everyone coming together at relatively short notice. And particularly great thanks to the library staff who have a lot to do in the back rooms to get these meetings organized, with the agendas and with getting the IT all set up, and while they all have regular duties. So my very great thanks on behalf of all the board for that support to make sure that this meeting was possible. I just want to start off with a word on the intent and process of this meeting. I'm fairly confident we are all now familiar with the budget proposal as presented by county staff and with further comments and recommendations by council liaison. Half of us were in the room when that conversation was had last week at county council. And if I'm not mistaken, all of the public members have had an opportunity to review those proceedings, which is very helpful. So the intention of today is to decide as a group whether we would like to go back to county council at the next regular meeting with some kind of a counter proposal to what was recommended by the council liaisons, or whether we don't wish to do that. And I'd like to hear from everyone. It could be that we've got a broad range of opinion on that subject. If you do wish to go back with a counter proposal, the intention of today is to discuss what your ideas are. We've got one idea on the table, but it's one of several, and to decide, which of the possible options we might or we would like to move forward with. Bearing in mind it's a fairly tight time turnaround. County council meets again, I think, next week. So today would be the day to lock in our answers on whether we want to have a counter proposal, and if we do, which one it might be. I would like to hear from everyone. And before we start getting into that conversation, I would like to see if anyone has any questions for clarity. So was there anything about either the budget proposal or the council liaison proposal or the conversation that was had at county council that either I or Dave or any of the other councillors would be able to clarify, just to make sure we're all on the same page when it comes to facts, what happened, what's been proposed, what does it mean, what was said, etc. And just before we get into questions for clarity, I do want to make sure that I honor the principle behind the council liaison's recommendations. As you know, I had some concerns about what was proposed, but I do want to honor the principle behind it. As those of you who have been involved in municipal financing and municipal governance for a while are familiar, the typical practice when there is a surplus at the end of a year is to fold that surplus into the ongoing operating expenses for the next year, or reallocate it somewhere so that there isn't a bump on the levy on the back of of that retained portion of those surpluses. So we try to keep the levy increases down simply by folding in those surpluses. And very much the intent of the proposal from council liaisons last week was to recognize that a lot of the library board's reserve has not been made through reserve transfers for deliberate, understood, recognized capital projects, but is an accumulation of the surpluses, which we all know have arisen with very good reason for the last few years within the library budget. So that is the principle of their proposal, is to look to draw down those surpluses before we look to increasing the budget. And I think that's truly fair. That's a very astute observation. It is very consistent with how we tend to do things within finances at the municipal level. So just wanted to get that on the table. Are there any questions for clarity before we get into our discussion proper? No, I don't see any questions for clarity. Okay, that's great. But obviously, raise your hand if there's anything at all at any point that you're not sure of. Just raise your hand and let us know. So our first question of the day is what are people thinking and feeling about what has been proposed, where council landed, and whether or not this board would like to move forward with a counter proposal. And for those adoring fans listening at home, just a reminder that council members who are appointed to the board of the library wear two different hats. When we're sitting in council chambers, we wear our council hat. And then when we come to library board, we remove our council hat and we put on our library board hat. So it's entirely fair and consistent to offer that opportunity to all members of the board to see what they think. What should we do in the best interest of the library board without keeping them beholden to anything they may wish to say or believe when we get back to council chambers. So it's an important distinction for those watching at home. So where are people at when it comes to the idea of a counter proposal? Who would like to go first? Adele.
Thank you, and thank you for introducing the subject. That way, it adds some clarity to our discussion. I looked at a lot of numbers this morning in preparation for today. And the one number, of course, that hit me over the head was the sheer amount of what we call our reserves. And a very important distinction that was brought up at the county council meeting by the Financial Liaison Committee was that they're not really true reserves. They are budget surpluses that have been mixed in with our reserves, so that at this point, I don't know whether we know what our true reserves are and what the budget surpluses are mixed together. So I would like, not today, but soon, to have county finance please let us know what are reserves and what are budget surplus. I think this would help with future decision making. And I'll be honest, I had never really thought too hard about the reserves. When we meet each month to go over our financial statements, that reserve number is not part of what we discuss every month. So I think I myself took my eye off the ball on that particular number. I went back on our minutes and I noticed in the spring that I was actually part of a motion to transfer the budget surplus from last year into reserves, and we all agreed. So I think all 9 of us throughout the course of the last 4 years or so, through some really busy times have just let this surplus build up. I went back to 2019, the end of 2019, before COVID hit and everything went sideways. And we only had reserves of just under 40,000. And it looks like at the end of last year, we're up to $384,000. Then when I looked at our salaries budgets, our salaries budgets increased year over year, but then they took a sharp dive last year when we actually asked for 12% less than the year before. This is budget, this isn't actual. This is what we needed for salaries, which is, of course, our biggest expense. And then I looked year over year at what we were asking for our salaries, and I see that for 2026, we're only asking for $50,000 more than we asked for back in 2023. So while the cost of keeping those same employees has increased year over year with cost of living, et cetera, our staff have somehow managed to shrink, to take on more individually, so that this year our staff are only going to cost, if we use up all the budget, $50,000 more than 3 years ago. So first of all, I'd like to, honor the staff for somehow getting the job done with basically the same money. Well, less money actually, because when you think of cost of living increases, et cetera, step increases, the budget in real money terms is actually less for salaries. What I have seen also over the last few years in terms of what the county is contributing is that in 2025, the county contributed actually less than 2023 and only $8,000 more than 2024. So because we did use reserves 2 years ago, I think we used $90,000 in reserves or budget surplus, whatever you want to call it. So while I agree that, and I think we could all agree, and I'll wait to hear from everyone else, that we have no need for a surplus of $384,000. How that surplus is going to be used to assist county council in developing a fair tax rate increase for the county would eventually be up to county council, of course. My hope would be that they don't empty the cookie jar in 1 year. While as a taxpayer, I could certainly appreciate, suddenly having that kind of money put against my tax bill. As a taxpayer, I would hope that reducing that surplus could happen over a period of years, especially since, speaking as a taxpayer, this is the last year of council's term and our term as well. And it does feel a bit like kicking the can down the road if this council uses all that surplus, which then leaves the next council with more challenges than they would have had if the surplus was used bit by bit. So I have no problem with basically giving the taxpayers back their money. And to tell you the truth, I'm a little embarrassed that we all let it get this high without noticing it, and with the county finance liaison committee finally bringing it to our attention. Thank you.
Great, thanks a lot, Adele. And thanks for doing the research on that and digging into previous years. And I know you'll recall, and those on the board will recall, the decrease. I guess last year was at the request of County Council, and staff at the library worked incredibly hard, Andrea in particular, to figure out ways to uh, to make the use of the resources that we've got and use the natural attrition of the library and merge some roles. It was a hard slog, and they did a great job. So thanks again, Andrea, to you and your team for coming up with those savings last year. That was great. Anyone, not anyone else, who would like to go next? Because I would appreciate hearing, especially from all the public members. Um, Paul, did you have your hand up? I'm afraid I can't see very well. Oh, Jackie.
I'll go. I don't have as much to say as Adele. I agree, of course, with everything Adele has said. And when I was looking at the budget numbers going back to 2023, I see that our allocation was 1.2 million back in 2023. And I wonder, how long has it been over $1 million? And I would say it's probably a lot of years that we would have to go back to see getting $1 million from council. I mean, in other words, it's regressing in terms of budget way back. I think that if we use the reserves this year, if we drain it, we are kicking it down the road, and it's a real problem for next year. So that even if there is a bit left, we can't nickel and dime our budget anymore to make up $200,000. It's not possible in terms of the library budget without reducing staff. And of course, reducing staff is reducing programs. And so essentially we would end up having a budget that is dismantling the library over the next years. I think it's too short-sighted to say we'll take it all out of reserves and next year, well, whatever happens, happens. I really feel very uncomfortable with that.
So Jackie, are you then in favor of discussing a counter proposal today as well? And I didn't ask that specifically of Adele. I just assumed the answer is yes, Adele, but maybe you could both clarify. You'd both like to discuss that today?
Yes.
Yeah. And Jackie? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, great. Maybe I'll go to Lisa and then to Paul.
And I will let the members of the public speak first. It's just that I have a question as the director, Andrea, who does the budget, should have the number for us to know what our reserve is so that we can make a decision today. If members of the committee aren't aware of what the actual reserves are, because we're not talking about reserves today, we're talking about a surplus.
Mhm.
So Andrea, as the director who is responsible for the budget, Andrea Brown, you, who is responsible for the budget, should be able to give the committee the answer that we're looking for right now as to what our reserves are for the library currently.
Wait, it isn't tracked separately, the reserves and the surplus are go into the same account, so it's not.
Okay. Okay, so when we were
the amount that was published in the county council report last Wednesday. So the balance of the reserve is the non-committed reserves are $353,016.45. But that's not including if we transfer any surplus from this year into reserve. So my understanding it's been standard every year that any surplus funds do get transferred into that library reserve. That's how we we fund our computer replacements on a cycle. It's how we purchased the library van. It's how we did all the funding for the Dorset, purchased all the furnishings and books. And so it does get used. It's been unusual since COVID, the amount of money that has been left over at the end of the year. It's been unusual.
Okay, so 335,000 is kind of what we're looking at. Thank you.
I see your hand, Cease, but if I could go to Paul first because he had his hand up first, that'd be great.
Thank you. I wanted to thank Adele for her usual strong analysis and number crunching. My response is very much an intuitive one and emotional one. I think because when I heard or saw the presentation discussions, I felt that it's a real big cut, and it's not going to be a good thing. At the same time, I understand with the surplus or slash reserve funds there that I understand what county council or the liaison group wants to see happen, but I do feel that it seems to me somewhat excessive. And doesn't seem to be any long range perspective on the thing. So I am with my fellow public appointees that we should be minimizing the use of the thing as much as possible. Make sure that we have something in that reserve surplus fund. And I do take somewhat offense to some of the comments where, again, as a taxpayer, when somebody referred to the money as a piggy bank, and I don't think we were doing that. So, in any case, I hope I made my position clear on my perspective on the thing.
Yeah, thanks very much, Paul. Cease, you had your hand up.
Now, Jennifer, if I can, Cease and go ahead, but I certainly have a comment.
Oh, sure. Dave, sure. Of course, I can't see your hand. You've probably been waving it around like crazy. I haven't been able to see it. Do you want to go first, Dave?
I'm
You're
sorry.
very welcome.
I'm just sorry to come in by phone, but just the way my circumstances are today, I had to. But I'm certainly glad I got here with the group. But I want it clear that we're not cleaning out the surplus or the reserves. There's still going to be 100 or more thousand in reserves. Like, we're not just going to take it all. But I guess I reiterate, like Adele and like Jackie and like Paul have said, it is taxpayers' dollars that we're dealing with, and that's what the liaison committee came up with. And I did say at the end of the meeting, I certainly supported them. So we can move forward together. I think in a good way that we can make our library service better. It's just it's challenging times right now for us, and I just wanted to comment on that.
Great. Thanks, Dave. Very fair. Cease.
Yeah, I was just going to more or less expand a little bit on what Dave was talking about just now. And because I asked the question specifically, I did not mess around. I asked strictly, are we going to have 6 digits left in reserves at the end of this situation? And the answer that I received was yes, which means over $100,000. So that's basically where we stand with what the reserves, or whatever we want to call them, surplus. The other thing was there were no cuts in any way, shape, or form to the actual expenditures required to operate the library for 2026. Now, 2027, of course, is unfortunately still a long way down the road. And yes, there are certain circumstances that are not predictable for 2027. But having said that, I think that anything that's going to require an additional amount of money beyond the $100,000 is going to be traumatic in itself. So I'm having a hard time disagreeing, because I did originally at the council meeting. I did disagree with what we were talking about, and I also echoed what Adele was saying, in that we should look at making sure we didn't drain the reserves in a one-time hit. And that's why I asked the question, will there be numbers left? And I have been told categorically, without question, that there will be at least $100,000 left, not close to 200, but close to 100,000 plus. And when you start looking at where we're going to go, and I could get into some of the rationale for why county council did argued the point why we should be using reserves, but that's part of the county council meeting. And if you want to go more into depth, I strongly suggest you watch their meeting, because that's not what we're here for. What we're here for is to determine whether or not the library is going to be negatively impacted by what we are doing. So all we're looking at is really not changing the operating expenditures for the library board, but merely where those expenditures are going to be funded. That's really what it boils down to. And the argument that we got back from the financial liaison was that this is not going to be 2026 is not going to be a good year all the way around, and 2027 appears to be a better prospectively looking year. So with that in mind, I accepted the challenge then to take on the budget as it currently stands, and I have not really changed my mind at that point. So as a board member, I would still, as long as we're not losing anything in our ability to operate, as long as it's not going to change anything in that particular direction, still leaves us with a safety net, which is over $100,000. We do not pay for capital. Therefore, that $100,000 should be more than enough to cover what we need at the end of the year. And maybe, I'm not saying we should, but there might be a surplus at the end of 2026 as well. We don't know that. And if there's not, there's $100,000 there.
Great. Thank you very much, Cease. And I'll jump in here, I think, with my thoughts. I fully acknowledge what you've just said, Cease, and certainly what Dave has said. I agree with those things. For me, the real worry is not the amount of money left over in the reserve at the end of the year. It's not the dip in the operating expenses this year. That has been also clarified. For me, it is the precedent that would be set by allocating a net $1 million from the county levy to the library for this year, knowing that next year there is no guarantee that after we've drained the reserve and the surpluses, I'll call them surpluses, after we drain those surpluses in one fell swoop to make up for for that difference, there is no guarantee that the library would then return back to a funding level by the county that meets its operating needs. For me, that is the outstanding question. It's the risk that we take, that if we drop the check from the county this year to 1 million, that we will struggle with an unknown council to increase it back up to operating level again in the years to come. That is the risk for me. Walt, I don't know if you have something, and Lisa, I think you had a question before, but I don't know if you have anything further to say.
I'm just going to say that I agree with everything that Cease said. Cease said it very eloquently. My thoughts, and to your comment, Jennifer, about unknown for another year and a new council coming on. Unfortunately, that's for every department, every service that the county tax dollars are responsible for. That we could put in that, okay, next year we want to do a certain road, and the next council comes along and says, you know what? No, we don't think we should spend the money on that. We should spend the money on the library, or you know what I'm saying? I don't think that we can speak to future councils' decision making, and we just have to do the best with what we have today, with the information we have, and with the size of the budget that we have for this year, and the increase all across the board. I don't see there being any other responsible option for county council to make.
I do hear what you're saying. I don't believe any other department has been asked to receive $300,000 less than what they say they need, on the wing and the prayer that next year it will go back up. I think the library board is unique in that. But you're right, all the departments are in the same boat when it comes to every 4 years there's a new slate of decision makers. That for sure is common. Walt, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, from listening to everybody talk, it seems like this large amount of money was accumulated over the last 4 years. So this council's over in 10 months or whatever it is, 11 months. And like what Lisa just said, and partially what Cease just said, that's a lot of taxpayers' money, which was collected over this council's period of time. And I think that definitely that should be reduced by the numbers that we talked about at council last week. Like if I remember correctly, it was 425,000 or plus with the counting this year, and that there was going to be like C said over 100,000. I thought it was 125,000. I don't remember the exact numbers, but I agree with everything that Lisa and CSIP said there. So I think that like Lisa just said, who knows what the next council is going to bring. I mean, you're trying to say that the library is different. Well, it's the whole financial of the county and everybody's municipalities is up for a real shock with all the costs and of doing things today, whether it's libraries or bridges or roads or whatever we're doing. So we're surely not trying to disband the library in any way. I don't hear Andrea or any of the other committee people saying that this past year was a dreadful year with a lot of complaints. It seems to me that it's running along. There's lots of new programs, and that's great. So that's where I stand. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Walt. So it sounds like across the room, I don't think I've missed anyone as first remarks, have I? Yeah, Jackie?
I just wanted to address the topic of reserves across the county. I did look at the budget in some detail and look to see which departments were actually being asked to draw from reserve, surplus, whatever we call it. And certainly, of course, there are a number of departments who have been asked to do the same thing. And it usually it amounted to 5 to 15% of their budget that they were being asked to take from reserves, which is an awful lot less proportionately than what the library is being asked to take from their reserves. There are reserves, looking at that statement of reserves for the county, there are a lot of departments with reserves. And the general administration reserve for the county is like $1.6 million. So there is other money out there. Not arguing that we shouldn't take a significant amount from our reserves for this year. I agree that yes, we do need to do that. We can draw it down. We should be doing that. But 100,000, if we have $100,000 left next year in reserves, it's not going to be enough. We're still going to be short a couple $100,000 to operate the library, unless the funding level is bumped way up. And as Jennifer has pointed out, the likelihood of that happening is low. So I guess in summary, I'm suggesting that other departments be taking more of their budget from reserves to lighten up our need to take 30% of our budget from reserves.
Thanks. And I do completely hear what you're saying in principle. I think the reserves for our different departments operate in a different way. The general principle across the board is that you would never use your reserves as general operating expenses. That's sort of rule number one, when in a typical year at a typical time. And we can certainly confirm with county staff, but my very strong expectation is that the things that have been are going to be purchased through reserves were planned purchases. They're capital items that we set money aside for year on year for 5, 10, 15, sometimes 20 years in order to afford to take it at a scheduled time. So it does operate a little bit differently. The capital expenses at the county and at the lower tiers are very often funded and planned way out using these reserve resources. And again, I might be getting my toes into hot water, and I apologize if I get this wrong, but I do believe, at least at lower tier, that that the council is mandated to have a working fund of a certain amount of reserves set aside in case one day nobody pays their taxes and we still need to pay out staff and and suppliers, etc. We're mandated to have those working funds in a reserve at a set level as dictated by the province. So I know what you're saying, but it does work slightly differently within the county. Very happy to invite our county CEO or CAO, I should say, to help us understand reserves better as a board and see how best we can work with ours and understand counties a little bit better. I think that would be a great conversation that we could consider having in the future. But I do hear what you're saying, in principle. Yes,
All right, Jennifer,
Dave.
if I may,
Yeah.
It's Dave. And a lot of our reserves are set aside, or surplus are set aside for the projects that weren't completed.
Yeah.
And I can use them as 3 examples so that they weren't completed. So we're hoping to use them up the following year to complete the projects that were projected to be done.
That's right. That too. That's right. Thanks very much, Dave. Indeed. Lisa.
And I was just going to say, when you look at some of the reserves I'll use roads as an example, or EMS, a lot of we have like a 10-year plan of replacing plow trucks and ambulances and things. So you'll see that the numbers seem very large, but that money is actually already allocated for a purchase that we're going to make maybe 5 years from now. So that's why they appear that way. And we can't take money from like the roads department as an example that's already been allocated for a plow truck we're going to buy in 2030 to offset the library budget.
Or the
wouldn't
county
that
budget.
committed reserves? If you're planning to take the money in 2030, is that not committed reserves as opposed to uncommitted?
Often they are committed, but there are expenses in 2026 that are, it's time to make that withdrawal in order to do that roads project or make that large purchase. Yeah.
Yeah.
Walt.
I know it didn't happen, but I think this would have been a great meeting to have Gary at here today. He has a lot of knowledge on budgets and in this situations like this. So was he invited, or I just like to I think it'd be great if we could, if maybe it's too late, but I think he has a lot of knowledge in regard to what we're discussing here.
He sure does.
And it is too late today. It is too late today, and I'm going to intervene here. And we could have Andrea here as well as finance, but that didn't happen today, Walt. So we just that can't be done. So
no. Okay, thank you.
But moving ahead, I think more interaction with county staff is a great thing, and I know they're very happy to join the group and meet with us and answer questions at any time. So that's they're certainly willing and able to do that.
Well, I think Gary has 25 or 30 or more years of experience in this type of budgeting, and I think it would have been great knowledge for us to have here at this meeting.
Okay, thanks, Walt.
Because we're all the counselors that are here, we're representing all the taxpayers. So that knowledge would have been very beneficial to all of us here that are sitting on this council. Thank you.
Thank you. So I am hearing some good consistency around the table. We obviously all want to do what's right for the taxpayers of Haliburton, that's for sure. We all agree that those surpluses in the reserves have to be taken down. That's consistent around the table. What I feel is different or what I'm hearing is different, is that some people would like to see that surplus taken down right away in 1 year, and other people would like that reserve to be taken down, or surpluses to be taken down in a more iterative way year on year. So that is I think that is where, if there is a counter proposal at all, it sounds like that's where it would or could be, is simply at the pace at which the drawdown happens, and whether it happens all of this year or another year. You will see that that one option of, I can think of at least, no, I can think of exactly 3 different options for drawing down the reserve. I've got 3 in my mind, but there is one that has been prepared by staff as for your consideration. It is not tabled as a motion. It is there to start a conversation on whether a sustainable drawdown could be possible. What is on the table is, for your perusal, is a scenario in which what is requested is that the 2025, so the year ending now, request to county be frozen, and that for the next year or 2 or 3, the ask for the county, from the county, remain frozen at the 2025 levels, or another level as this board sees fit, maybe the 2024, 2023. It's up to this board to discuss that. And that as the budget for library operations naturally increases year on year, as all departments do, by virtue alone of step increases and cost of living expenses and capital expenses. We do have a few, they're minimal, but it is there. It is natural for a budget to increase, but as those budgets increase, that they be taken from the surplus rather than added to the request onto the county. The benefit of this is that should this option be considered appropriate by the board, it would mean that there would be a 0% increase request from the library board for this and subsequent years, which means a 0% impact on the levy increase moving ahead at the county for the next several years. And so there would be nothing asked for that isn't already levied in the budget. And the surplus would be drawn down in a more sustainable way without setting a precedent of a major drop down in 1 year. It is one option, and others may have other options as well, which would be good to hear.
Jennifer, I'd like you to repeat all that, and I'd like to know where that came from. But anyway, go ahead.
Where this option came from?
Yes.
Sure. It has been discussed, by myself and a number of different folks, including Gary. This is something that he thinks is a very sustainable way forward, and agrees that it's a rational option for the library board to consider. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, Paul, and then Adele.
It sounds like that proposal might be something that's palatable to council, with the support from Gary, council. Perhaps it'll fly, and it would take or make it a little bit easier to accept. I suppose I would support that, but it is all at the pleasure of council, whether everyone on council would support it so that it does go. So if there's a good chance, I would be in support of that. If not, I would say we should just cut our losses, throw the towel in, and let the thing go as it was, and put this thing to rest so that we're not just spinning our wheels for a number of different cycles.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm surrendering somewhat, but I would take the option that you specified, and if it's not going to fly, let's just cut the losses and carry on and see what happens next year. I mean, that's all we can do, right? It's at the pleasure of council. So I won't say any more. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Paul. Are there other options that people have considered that they would like to raise? Yes, Adele.
Not to answer your question, but just to comment, before you asked that question, I firmly believe in moderation in all things, whether that's moderate tax increases or whether it becomes a moderate drawdown of these surpluses. If county council could convince me as a taxpayer that they need all that money right now, then of course I might change my mind on that. But I do want to take this opportunity just to remind us all again of how we got here. I mean, when we started at the end of 2019, just before COVID hit, we had reserves of $40,000. And by the end of 2020, 9 months into COVID, our reserves were up to 200,000. And this is all because of underspent salaries. So while we did have the budget for salaries, we were prevented from using it just because of the decrease in operations. By the end of 2021, our reserves had only increased 10,000. By the end of 2022, which was the end of the last term of council, not this council, we were up to 283. And that's when we all started. So when we all started at the beginning of 2023, we had reserves of $283,000 or unspent budget surpluses. Since then, we have taken the opportunity, or council has taken the opportunity, to structure our budget so that what they were giving us so that we have used some of our reserves. And so since the beginning of our term of council and the board, our reserves have only increased by a net of $100,000. So it's not $400,000 this term of council. It has only increased 100,000, but nevertheless, we are at $384,000, most of which was the last term of council and COVID. And if we look at why we're not spending those salary dollars in the last few years, I think a lot of it has been to do with staff leaving and the library being unable to attract good candidates quickly. We've had long periods where we've been short-staffed and other staff have had to fill these vacant positions and the money hasn't been spent. So it does show a bigger picture of how we can attract people to come and work in the county for these well-paid positions, because I'm proud that we are paying our staff well, but to attract the caliber of staff we need to this county, I think there's some questions that need to be asked, whether it be housing or healthcare or any other factors. So I just wanted to bring that point up, and I guess close with saying that if county wants to take all the money, all the excess budget surplus this year, I would prefer a more moderate way of doing it.
Thanks, Adele. Just while we've got you then, do you have a model in mind that you would like to raise and discuss with the group?
I find it hard to say what should happen beyond my term on the board. I don't see how we can say let's do it over 3 years. I think some of that is for the next council and board to decide. I think the question before us now is what do we do this year, keeping in mind that there are other years ahead of us where other people will be making decisions.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd be looking at maybe if we think we have $300,000 that should be given back to the taxpayers, then as Cease has said, and I think everyone else has said, how quickly are we going to do it? My definition of moderation may be different than other people's. But I certainly wouldn't want to do it all in 1 year.
Other thoughts? So we've got we're fairly split down the middle. We've got some wishing moderation and some wishing to rip off the Band-Aid. I suppose we should have a motion as to whether we want to proceed with a moderated model to recommend or not. Perhaps could I see a show of hands for those in favor of exploring a moderated model? So that's, I see 4. Are the other 4 voting members opposed, therefore? So all opposed to exploring a moderated model? If you could raise your hand. And Dave, how say ye?
Oh, no, sorry. I said my hand is down.
Your hand is down.
Me. Yep.
So you would not like to proceed with a moderated model?
No, absolutely not.
All right.
But I'd also like to say that I think that, all this discussion should be taken back to the rest of council.
Oh, and it absolutely
So
will.
you're asking us to vote on something that, there's a lot more information to come out, needless to say, when we get to the next meeting.
I think what we're looking for today is whether the board wishes to present something formal at the next at the next county meeting.
No
I'm sorry.
I'm fine then, no problem. It's okay. I understand where you're going. It's okay. I understand.
So would you like to see the library board work on a formal recommendation then?
No, you were saying that you're asking for what was the word, compromise?
A moderated drawdown model.
No, I'm like Dave said, and I think a few other people. No, right now today, whatever was discussed at the last council meeting, it was all agreed upon. That I think, but now that we've got more information, that who knows what's going to come out of it when the final decision is made.
All right. Well then, presuming that the procedural bylaw is the same as at county, I believe that motion is therefore denied because as we've had a split vote, the nays have it. Is that a correct memory of the procedural bylaw, Andrea? Would you confirm? Are you able to confirm?
Just gonna go,
Yes.
hasn't come up, but I'm pretty
Yes,
sure.
it is.
Correct, yeah.
At the library board, Dave, you've got that document there in front of you? It's a different procedural bylaw.
I don't have the document. Well, good for you, but I don't have it in front of me, but a tie vote is lost.
Yeah, that's.
All right, well then, we are finished today's conversation. And I do thank everyone for their time and their frank offerings of their thinking. We shall see what happens. Yes, Lisa.
Before we go, I just want to say thank you to Ms. Adele Espina for all of that homework. That was very impressive, Adele. Thank you for that. That was excellent.
Thank you, Lisa. It's actually how I organize my thoughts. So
You should see her at genealogy. It's radical. Cease.
Yeah, I have to say, Adele, like you had numbers there that were awesome, and I don't disagree with anything that you are saying because I shared that same argument and I presented it to county council at the county council meeting, looking at a slightly more graduated method of doing it. But when I listened to the argument that came back, and it's unfortunate that you could not hear the argument, you'd have to play it back. to hear it, was that we were basically assured that two things was going to happen. One, that the reserve or surplus would not be dry; it would be $100,000. And the other commitment that we got is that there will be, going forward, for as long as anybody can know, there will be a Haliburton County Public Library, period. That option is not going anywhere. And so there's going to be a minimum requirement, and it probably will be a higher budget requirement if we take the surpluses this year and apply them all the way we're talking about doing it, which is roughly about 75% of the surpluses. But in light of the argument that was presented to us by the financial liaison, it's almost impossible to avoid something without going up the way in terms of a levy. So I think everybody recognizes that there's no way that we're going to be able to, unless there's a miracle and the province decides to put more money in, that we're going to be able to live with $1 million budget next year. But having said that, that's something that we recognized at the county, and I certainly believe we recognize it here. If you look at the expenditures, the expenditures are more than $1 million. So consequently, that deficit, if you look at it as a deficit, because we are augmenting it with surplus reserve, will have to be made up next year. And that is the way it is. But the confidence at the county level was that will be an option that can be done next year. And that's all I can do is just relate the argument that I had, because I think both Jennifer and myself at the county meeting basically voiced that opinion of what you're saying. And but again, when you're in a triage program in the middle of a war, you got to take some decisions that are really, really hard. And unfortunately, this was one of them. And so therefore, that's what it is.
Any further comments before we adjourn the meeting? All right, well then may I have a mover and a seconder to adjourn? Adele? I just don't see any other hands, I'm afraid. Jackie, thank you. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you everyone for your time. And I'm glad we had an opportunity to hear from the public members in particular. I think it's really important that the board be able to speak frankly. So thank you everyone.